We all know we should read more. There are thousands of books being written every year and thousands more that will be published, and we can't get to them all. So, what are the books, the really great books, that will change you, that will give to you some of the riches of our culture and help you understand the world in a better way? What are the books that will transform you as a person and make you a better person? We, me, myself included, have been robbed of a deep and important education in the great books of the Western world. We've been denied them for various reasons in our formative and educational years. And these are books that most of us, myself included, will have to dig out for ourselves. Several years ago, I became a part of a great books program because my college didn't offer the depth of reading that I wanted to do. And so I had to dig them out for myself, and I learned more that way. Even though it is a robbery, even though it is a misfortune not to have been given them as part of your education system, there is something deeper that you do get when you're forced to be the one to dig out meaning from great books by yourself. Walker Percy talks about this in his essay, The Loss of the Creature. And he says that the best place and the best time to read some of the great works of literature are if you find them serendipitously and you read them. He's like a prisoner in jail, happening upon Shakespeare and reading the words and how that would grip him in a way more meaningful than sitting in a sterile classroom with a book entitled Shakespeare Study Notes on the flyleaf. And so it is a blessing in disguise to be able to read some of these great works for ourselves and work through them in meaningful ways. What are some of the key books, some of the books to start with? Well, they're the books that have been most footnoted, the books that sit at the headwaters and influence all the other books that come after it. And of course, the very first one of those, outside of the scriptures, is the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. I recommend starting with the Iliad. It takes place around 800 BC, within the war between the Trojans and the Greeks, the Achaeans, over Helen's abduction by Paris. It's a 10-year conflict, which ends with the Trojan horse, although in the Iliad, that event does not occur. It centers around the rage of Achilles. Achilles is mad at the leader, Agamemnon, over a girl and refuses to fight. Then there's a long list of wars and battles by the great and heroic men of Greece against the great and heroic soldiers of Troy. Eventually, not to spoil anything, Achilles loses a friend in battle, and that causes him to engage in warfare. You'll have to read for the rest. The themes of fate and free will, the nature of the gods, which are petty and like humans, greedy, lustful, envious, jealous, but also in some ways kind of grand in an interesting way. They provide a unique look into a very much vanished culture, into a world very different than our own. What does it mean to be a courageous warrior? What does it mean to be pious in those days? And that will open up your mind and your eyes both to later works of philosophy, the philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome critiquing and also agreeing in part with the Homeric legends, as well as a deeper understanding of the myths and legends of the gods that impact and influence writers from Lucretius on down. So that is definitely a good place to start. Skipping up 400 years then, you have to read something by Plato. Plato wrote dialogues based upon his teacher, Socrates, that deal with ethics. So what kind of life should someone lead, and what is a good life, and what does that look like to lead a good life, as well as epistemology. How do we know things? What is knowledge? He also is important in reconciling essence, what a thing is, with its change. So a lot of the thinkers before him, the natural thinkers, talked about nature and things always being in a state of flux. You can never step in the same river twice, as well as saying that everything that change is just an illusion. Plato put those two things together with the doctrine of the forms, something eternal that gets mapped onto something temporal. He talks about how to live in light of that, how to live the life of a philosopher, what a city should look like, what a just city should look like. So definitely start with some Platonic philosophy. I recommend starting with this Last Days of Socrates. There are 4 dialogues centered around the death of Socrates, Plato's master. The first one is the Euthyphro, which deals with the nature of piety and justice. Is a thing good because the gods say it is good, or do the gods say it's good because it is good? Talking about the nature of authority and how you know what is good and true. The Apology is his defense, Socrates' defense in front of the people of Athens about why he shouldn't be killed, why he's not the corrupter of the youth, and who the true corruptors of the youth are, and why he does what he does. Socrates famously going around asking questions, showing people that they don't know what they do know, in hopes that people will repent of their lack of knowledge and live a more virtuous life. After that, there's the Crito, which is a friend of Socrates, comes up and asks him to escape from the city. And Socrates begins famously by saying, should one ever do injustice? And Crito says no. And then he proves to Crito that it would be an injustice to leave the city, and therefore he must accept the city's verdict and die. And finally, the Phaedo is the day of his death. He is giving an expose on the soul. Why do people do what they do? Why he likens human nature to a chariot with a good horse and a bad horse, and their intention, the flesh and the spirit. And at the end of the Phaedo, he famously drinks his poison hemlock. You can see it there in the picture, and dies a heroic death. He set the stage for Western thought, Western philosophy, from Platonism, Neoplatonism, Christianity, and everything else in between. And whether you love him or hate him, he stands central to Western thought and Western thinking. And he will do your soul good, I think. Next is The City of God. I have here my 2-volume set, the new edition published by Babcock. Tremendous read. He kind of takes the Western pagan tradition and synthesizes it and reviews it, talking about the history of the founding of Rome, how it was founded on a patricide and therefore wrong, the history of the gods, the goods the gods gave to the city, as well as the many evil examples that the gods set. Talks about philosophy, Stoicism, and how a Christian should emulate the Stoics in being virtuous and brave, but not in being unfeeling. Talks about Epicureanism and the problems of not believing in the soul. He talks about Platonism, where he agrees with Plato, where he disagrees with Plato, and he sets the tone and the stage for Western philosophy and theology ever since. He's the most important writer to the medievals. He's the most important writer in the Reformation. He's the most important writer philosophically until Descartes, maybe, barring, of course, Thomas Aquinas. So he's super important. Dealing with the eternal city, the things that matter, the things that stick around, contrasting with the temporal city. And what does it mean to be a good citizen of this temporal realm? So definitely have to read St. Augustine's City of God. It's a long work, but definitely worth working through. After that, I would recommend a dip into the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. This is the John Carey translation, which I like. I prefer the Mendelbaum one, but the notes in this one are terrific. I've actually gotten to teach this one to a high school class a few times, so I'm more familiar with it than the Mendelbaums, but either way, Dante shows us the great synthesis of the medieval mind. He takes everything he knows and he puts it into a poem about the soul's journey, one man's journey, from earth through hell, up into purgatory and to the beatific vision of God on high. It's theological, it's cosmological, it's philosophical. He uses Aristotelian philosophy, talking about the ends and the ultimate good. His system of virtue maps onto Aristotle's. He also uses a lot of biblical allusions and theological points, talking about obviously the soul and heaven and hell, eternal themes. It's chock full of interesting tidbits on Italian nation states and Florence, especially his own city where he was writing in exile from. So definitely an interesting book, one you want the notes handy for, because there's a lot of leaders in France, in Florence that you would not necessarily know, that I didn't know at least, but definitely a work that shows you what the medievals thought about the world. Cosmology, for example, the Earth being at the bottom of the universe, the stars being on top, the world moving with the force of the primo mobile, the first mover, and they're moving by force of attraction around the spheres. That's how they thought about the heavens. Very inspiring and beautiful, even if you disagree with it. And finally, you got to get some Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the greatest wordsmith of the English language. According to Harold Bloom, he created the modern man by giving voice to the inner thoughts, inner turmoils of an individual like never before. He is beautiful, he's funny, and he's definitely well worth reading and watching today. I'd recommend starting with Hamlet, just because that's my favorite one. It's a play on revenge, on love, on the nature of knowledge. There's plays within plays that talk about how you know things. Talks about what man is like, what people are like. Deals with suffering and betrayal and all the great themes of humanity. Just picking up here and leafing through, looking for a quote to read, just to give you a sense of it if you haven't read it before. This is from Act 2. What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of the animals, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man pleases me not. Or Ophelia, the girl in the play, she says, we know what we are, but we do not know what we shall be. Plenty of quotable lines and interesting looks into the world. So those are the 4 books I would recommend giving a read, or sorry, 5 books I'd recommend giving a read. If you haven't already, let me know what 5 books you would recommend. And also, personal self-education is difficult. It's hard, but it's very meaningful. Having participated in this over the last 6 or 7 years has been one of the most rewarding things for me. It's given me lots to think about and chew on, and it has helped me along the way of trying to begin to realize what it means to be both a gentleman and a scholar.